The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. I'm Charles Christian, and thank you very much for tuning in again. And I'd also like to say a big hello to all those listeners on the latest stations, 4 more now, who have joined the syndication network, who are listening to the show for the very first time. This week's show is given over to an interview with Steve Asher, a long-time Kentucky-based paranormal researcher and author of a number of books, including The Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, where he worked for many years as a warden, and The Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum. Let's get on with the interview. Hello, Steve. Good to speak to you.
Hey, it's great to talk to you too, sir. I hope you're having a great day.
I am indeed. Right, so a question I always like to start with, give us a nutshell of what it is you're doing, because, I mean, you're investigating hauntings, you're doing lots of things. What's your sort of brief, if you like? What do you spend your days doing?
Well, you know, it's sort of a kind of a weird way of answering this, but it's sort of it's segmented. It's very much in the vein of mild-mannered whoever by day, and by night I do this. By day, my actual profession is teaching life skills to special needs adults, and I do a lot with Special Olympics, which is a program here that we do a lot of different sports-related things with special needs folks. Mm-hmm. But obviously by night, that's when people know me from my books, like The Haunting of series and other things like that. So it depends what time you catch me, to be honest, on which hat I'm wearing.
What started you off on this? Is it something you've always had a fascination with since you were a kid, or did you have some experience that set you on this route? You know, did you live in a haunted house when you were growing up, or what was the background?
I won't say I love hate. I love fear. I was grew up watching some wonderful Hammer films and a lot of the early Vincent Price adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe stories and things. And so I always loved that. There were times when I had encountered, I guess, maybe what you would call shadow people and things like that when I was younger, and it really frightened me quite badly. And I was kind of I don't know. I mean, I was kind of a red-blooded kid, but I was kind of a timid kid. I did not feel very much in control of stuff, and as most children don't, and that definitely didn't help. So what I ended up doing was taking, you know, the old adage of there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Mm-hmm. So I went to our public library, and I started asking, you know, about where are the books on esoteric subjects, and which actually I was probably 9 or 10. So I said, do you have books on ghosts? So the lady pointed back. They go down that way, young man, to the 133 section. And so I slowly started looking through books of guys like Hans Holzer, and, you know, worked my way up into like Montague Summers, and all different type of things that touches on foreign ghosts and the paranormal and the ESP and spontaneous combustion and the Von Daniken books and all that. The whole ball of wax, as we say over here. So it was kind of that turned into a passion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, it's probably good you asked for a ghost, because I think if you were 8 or 9 and 9 or 10 and you asked for esoteric books, I think they'd probably think you were slightly weird.
Oh no, they definitely knew I was an odd kid. I mean, I was born in 1969, so at this time, mid-70s, and so I've got the striped shirt and kind of the Pugsley Adams haircut. I was a little round kid too. I was stout, and this little Wiggly Wiggly walking in there, And after a while, they got to know me as, oh, he's that little Asher boy. He's a good kid who's alive. And before it was over with, by the time I was 13 and 14, I was like, do you happen to have the English translated for the rites of exorcism with the Stations of the Cross and all that? And they were just, they throw it off their backs. They just accepted it as who it was. And thank goodness I am from a small community. It's called Princeton, Kentucky. And it's like a lot of smaller areas and Bible belts, as we call here. It's, very faith-based. But they knew my intentions. It's very much like, and I don't compare myself to like a demonologist. So like, obviously I'm not ordained, but you have to kind of know the enemy, and you have to kind of know the ground you're walking. So you better study up. And that's sort of the mindset I had, especially as a young guy, because again, I was quite scared of the situation.
What about Kentucky? I mean, it's one of the older established states, so it's got a lot of, if you like, modern history to it. Does it have a strong ghostly, reputation?
Well, sure. I mean, if you go back to guys like Daniel Boone and people like that helped to kind of cut through, and they say discover, obviously there were people living here, so let's be real about that. But to lay claim and to explore, the explorer aspect of it. Yeah. Guys, like himself ran into what they thought were Bigfoot. They talked about running into different type of, entities and spirits and different sort of paranormal things. And there's a certain amount of with it. And as of Kentucky, a lot of my family were like French Huguenots, and did have when they settled in the Appalachian Mountains, which is sort of the when a lot of people think of Kentucky, they either think of horse racing or like the guys sitting in front of the little shacks with the long beards and the jugs with the X's on. Yeah. The truth of it, it's somewhere in between. And sandwiched in all that is old folklore, simple things that you might consider. I will knock on wood out of luck. Just a throwback to old superstitions and stuff. But there's a lot of hills and hollows, or hollers as we would call here. That's just rife with stories. I mean, anything from witches to ghosts to there's even reports of alien contact throughout Kentucky, and just all kinds of different things. 12-foot giants. That supposedly they'd found bones of in various locations here throughout Kentucky. And we have vast what they call a karst system, which is basically a hollowed out cathedral-sized cave system by natural water erosion, and that's all under Kentucky. Connects to I'm not sure if you've heard of the Mammoth Cave system here in the United States, but it's a pretty big one. It's a pretty big one, and it actually runs into a small town that I live in, and so you can't quite get away from lakes and this and that. It's just so prevalent here. Yeah. And all that ties into superstition. So there's a lot of it.
Now, you have written a number of books on hauntings relating to Kentucky. You've got Hauntings of the St. Vincent Academy, the State Penitentiary.
If you want, I can rattle them off real quick.
Yes.
There's the Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, which I actually had worked for 10 years as an officer there, and saw a lot of really strange things. It's the Kentucky's only supermax prison. And the second is the Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, which sounds like a very kind of cruel way of saying it, but this is back in the time when they used terminology like, that, or if, a person didn't have PTSD, they were shell-shocked. Yes. The nomenclature and the vernacular was a lot more coarse, but it was more direct. Yes. And there was Hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy, which was sort of a Catholic orphanage kind of home for wayward girls. And then there was the follow-up to the first book, Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary 2, Habitual Hauntings. And more or less it touched on certain stories that had developed since I did that initial book. and just some that I didn't have the full story, so I didn't put it in the first book. And that was, I was going to be, like I said, a 3-parter, but obviously it ended up being 4 parts, and which was fun. Obviously I have other interests. I've always had an interest in folklore, superstition, urban legends, the natural world, all the stuff that ties in everything from fairies to all this other stuff. And obviously a lot of that is maybe interpretations of different situations people's encountered. But I do think when you have something that runs through every culture, obviously there are kind of archetypes and to certain situations, but cultures all over the world are seeing some of the same things and having the same.
Yes.
There has to be some commonality to that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. We're just saying just now that you'd worked in the State Penitentiary. Was that sort of the inspiration to start writing about it, your sort of experiences there?
It's one of these things again, I'm a very kind of blue collar working class guy. So some of the terminology I'm going to use is not going to be, I'm not Oxford educated. I'm just a simple regular guy, but I more or less stepped in it. It was a thing where there was a guy who had written a book who I thought it was an interesting book, and it was an interesting take on a subject. And I had mentioned it just out of the blue, said, "Hey, I really like your take on this." I did not know at the time, but writers love to hear someone say, "Hey, I really like your book." That makes their day, their week, their month.
Yeah.
Well, and talking to this individual, he said, so he worked in the penitentiary. And I said, well, there are jails in various places and all that. And he said, did you ever see anything weird? And he's like, and I was like, well, a few, handful of things. I had a lot of other officers that did. And he said, I said, I actually wrote a few things down. He's like, really? I said, yeah. And he asked me, I'll take a look at them. I'm sure. You take a look at, the story. It's not real fleshed out, but it's the basics. And anyway, and he said, do you mind if I show this to my editor? I'm like, does he need a laugh? Sure, go ahead. I mean, just it's very crude. And anyway, he come back in about a week, and he said, "Hey, do you have any more of these?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. I mean, I've been collecting multiple stories throughout the 10 years I was there." He said, "Great. Can you get me 65,000 words?" And I'm like, "For what?" No, I'm thick. I'm not getting it. And he says, "For the book you're writing." I'm like, whoa, no, I'm not a writer. I'm doing good to spell my name. They said, well, look, some of the punctuation needs work, because obviously it did. And but the bones of this is really good. And the way you kind of turn the phrase, you write like you speak. It's not pretentious, and it's pretty much straightforward. I said, well, I don't know how else to be. And I said, and that's good. And it's, I don't try to engage or anything with the I'm a ghost hunter thing. I don't have ghost heads on my wall. I don't, I investigate situations, and I don't know what it is. I'll tell you that right off jump, is that I have zero clue what I'm dealing with. There's sort of a trend, especially in U.S., like if you watch certain shows, television shows and whatnot, everything has to be a demon. Everything has to be this type of ancient dark entity, which I will tell you right up front, if I think a demon's in that room, I'm going any way but that room. I'm not going to play with something that's ancient and timeless, because I'm no fool. Yeah. I may have been born yesterday, but it wasn't today. It's just a thing of, I respect power, just like I respect a snake in the grass. I don't know what that is. It's not bothering me. I'm not bothering it. And I think if some of these people actually stepped up on some entity like that, they wouldn't be around to do the show.
Yeah.
If if that is indeed what those things are. I'm always to say, I don't know what I'm dealing with. In all the years I've done this, and I've done this more or less since I was in my middle teens, now 51. I just know there is energy out there. I know there's apparently intelligent entities that can respond, and sometimes even get what you're fixing to say. And I don't know why it is, but it's an interesting phenomenon. Just EVPs. I don't know. I don't have the confidence to go, oh, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe once we pass on, if we do go to that other side or whatever, if that's waiting for us. Maybe we'll get the answers then. But so far, no one's come back and let me know. So
yeah, tell us some of the things in the Kentucky State Penitentiary. I mean, was this one that back in the old days was a site for executions, or what? You said it was maximum security, so it would have been the most serious, dangerous criminals in there.
Certainly. Well, if memory serves, as Batman would say, the institution come online Christmas Eve, I think, of 1888, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it actually used to have a plaque above the entrance of the doorway where they brought, in the intake for new inmates. And it says, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." Because it was a penitentiary. It was about penance. It was about hard time. It was not about, well, lad, let's talk about your childhood. It was like, here's a chain on your ankle. Here's a pile of rocks, like you would see in the old, James Cagney movies. Mm-hmm. So it was very brutal. Hot boxes. This is back in the days when they would hang men. This is back in the days when they would shoot them in firing squads. We had a lot of deaths in what they called Old Sparky, which is an electric chair, mm-hmm. which in a lot of places has been phased out for lethal injection. But there's a weird sort of a nefarious distinction that certain inmates have because they're grandfathered in. They can choose which they want, either lethal injection or the electric chair. It's a very strange place, and it's, to look at it, if you've ever looked at sort of like a medieval castle, mm-hmm. It has the stonework, and it has portcullises, and the Widow's Walk, and it looks like a castle, and it's actually called the Castle on the Cumberland, which the Cumberland River is what runs right in front of the in front of the penitentiary. And I mean, there's been, Lord, so many deaths from inmate on staff, sometimes staff on inmates back in the old days. Not every inmate should have been in there. This is back in the day when, a young boy could go into prison for stealing a loaf of bread, or, and that's, again, be real. This was the, right at the tail end of the Civil War. And, there was a lot of racial tensions, and there was a lot of people being jailed for the color of their skin, for minor infractions. So there was a lot of racial tension and a lot of fighting up until really the 1970s and 80s. There were still a lot of race riots and things like that. So it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. Is the prison still open, still functioning, or is it been closed down?
Yes, everywhere but the St. Vincent's Academy is still an up and functioning facility. I believe it houses currently, if memory serves, about 800 men.
Right.
And they vary from death row, maximum security. Yeah. You have the people, they're all in red, and the guys in yellow are the ones ones are acting out, the violent ones, the cutters, the ones like that, the ones that will throw excrement and other things at you, not to be too descriptive.
Yeah.
Nutters, Yeah. And then you have a handful that are there that are just general people. Maybe they're in there for auto theft or armed robbery. They didn't kill anybody, but they still were bad boys.
Yeah.
And you even have a group of people that are in there, say they are there for sex crimes. Let's say if they're there for rape, a lot of times they have to be in a special unit of protective custody, or the other inmates that kill them. There's a certain, I guess you could say, honor among thieves. And one guy's like, "Well, I did shoot my boss, but I didn't rape a kid." Both are horrible things, but there's, it's that thing of going, well, I'm a bad guy, but I'm not that.
Yeah. So
it's a strange world. It's unlike anything I've ever saw before. They have their own commissary. They have their own food. They have their own drinking water. They have, all that. Everything is self-contained. Mm-hmm. And it's very strange. I was there during, we had an ice storm in 2008. Everything shut down.
Yeah.
Nobody in, nobody out. And the place just went on like usual. It was its own self-sustaining thing. It was strange, a little scary to see.
What sort of tales do you have of the penitentiary?
Wow. Oh, I'm trying to think of something. There's so many that I'm kind of stuck on picking just one. I know that there was down on Death Walk. This was actually 15 left. There was a cell house, 3 cell house, and they would have 15 walk, which is what like in the Green Mile where they would have the one solitary walk.
Yeah.
And there was a cell down there, and a guy come down. He was doing rounds during count. Well, he counted a guy. He was sitting there, and he was reading. The guy was reading the Bible in the cell, which a lot of times these guys try to settle up in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. You ever heard that expression, get religion in prison?
Yes.
So anyway, this gentleman went back up, and the officer told his supervisor, okay, here's my count. And they said, no, you're off one. And he said, who did I miss? I said, no, you put one too many. And they're like, no, there's the guy down 15. I said, what are you talking about? This is just after shift change. And so, of course, the supervisor thought, day shift didn't tell me about him. Let's go see what's going on with this guy. Went down there. They didn't see anybody. And so they went ahead and checked the rest of the cells, but they come back and they found that same Bible there, open to a passage. Nobody was in the cell. All the cells were cleaned out. And the cell was deathly cold. Just things like that. Just things that would not make any sense anywhere else other than there. Mm-hmm. I have had so many shadows, so many cold chills in the middle of like August. August in Kentucky is like pretty, very, very sticky, humid, heavy. We're almost tropical at this point in the South. It's hot, but just getting just cold chills and lights going off and on, and down in you have your cell walks. You have a scream come out. You go, look, there's nobody in the cell. I was making a round. The way the cells are set up is like this. You're walking down a corridor. To the left, there's, say, 12 or 13 cells. To the right, there's 12 or 13 cells with metal bar cell fronts. Mm-hmm. As you step onto the walk, to your right is a opening for a shower area. It's a common area for, like, janitors. You walk down to the back, there's a fire escape, which will take you down to the outside in case of fires. Mm-hmm. I down to check the back exit door, which I do every round. And as I'm turning around, I see first I thought it was heat, like heat coming off of the ground. It was a waver in the air. Yeah. Odd. And it formed almost a shadow. Now understand, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't have epilepsy, no history of mental illness. And I don't see this stuff all the time. But when I did see it, I take notice. So the shadow darts into the shower. And first I thought, well, maybe someone was walking. Maybe one of my supervisors had an extra key, got onto my walk, and was walking down the hallway. So I started kind of trotting up there going, well, who's on my walk? Usually they announce themselves. Yeah. And as I'm getting closer, I'm probably about 10 cells away from the entranceway. Another larger shadow, more solid this time, goes into it. It's not going on the wall. It's moving into the cellway. So I'm like, what is going on? I hear a scuffling, almost like someone's getting roughed up in a shower, getting a bit of bad business, getting smacked around. I run up in there, and about 2 cells up, you can still hear somebody yelling out. I pop my flashlight on. I look around. I don't see anything. I can still hear the voices. And so I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. So maybe someone's fighting on the hallway. So I step out in the hallway. This is nighttime. There shouldn't be anybody out. I'm looking around. I look up and down all the walks. No one's there. I asked the officer that controls the gates in and out of my cell house, who was just here? Then they said, what are you talking about? I said, I heard voices. Did you let somebody on my walk or maybe on the upper walks? And they're like, no one's been here. And they said, I've been down on the lower walks since, we had let in. Mm-hmm. I can explain. Now, I didn't say a lot about it. It happened to a couple more officers. Once people realized that I was kind of open to that, they started sharing their experiences. And I asked one of the old timers there, an inmate, I said, can I ask you a question? And please don't laugh at me. And he went, sure, go ahead. I said, what do you think about spirits? And he was kind of a joker. He says, "I'd rather not deal with them." I said, "No, me either. But have you seen any here?" And he went, "Are you talking about C&D walk?" And that was the walk. I was like, "Yeah." He said, "You see them in the hallway or you see them in the showers?" I said, "Yeah, it was in the showers. It was two of them. One big, one small." "Right. How do you know this?" I said, "Well, there were some guys. He'd been there for years. There was a guy who, I'm not sure if they were fighting over a debt, but anyway, this guy went in there and pretty much killed another fella in the showers." Things like that happen all the time. There's so many spots. It's easier to tell you where someone wasn't stabbed, raped. It's a war zone. And especially back in the old days when, not all the staff were there about making sure that these guys did their time and went home. It was like for their entertainment. Some of these guys just would fight it out in the yard. Think of like the old Cool Hand Luke type movies, Paul Newman type movies. Some of that was very real. And I think that with the death and all the different mental stress of that place, and it's all made of limestone, and it's built on top of limestone with natural waters running under it, which creates its own currents. Of course, collects energies. I think it's just a large negative energy battery, because I've never felt anything like that, and I've been all over. I've been all over the world. I've been in all kinds of different locations. Very few other places feel that draining, that dark, that possessive. It has its own. It's hard to describe it. It's like walking up on a person that means you ill will. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. That's the only way I can explain it. Mm-hmm. It's like if you're getting off, you're queuing up to go into school or whatever, and you see that bully down at the end of the hall, and you're going to have to walk right past them.
Yeah.
And the odds are you're going to get socked. But this felt heavier than that. This felt like it was going to really hurt you. I've trained new officers to come on the walks, and they would have experiences, and they would turn their badge in and go. And the other officers would laugh at them, and I'm like, "No, they're smart. We're fools for staying here." But it changes you. It truly does. It left me knowing that some of the assertions that I had, and some, and disproving some of the ones I had too. But moreover, it showed me that some things that happen are going to leave lingering traces. My father, who had been an officer, a chief of police actually in our town, started there, worked there for about 5 years. And I spoke to him before he passed, and I'm glad I had the conversations with him. I said, "Look, so let's talk about some of the heavy stuff at the pen." He said, "Well, it's a very violent place." And he told me this when I first hired him. He said, "Son, I kind of wish you wouldn't go there." Mm-hmm. I thought he was like, "Oh, I don't want you to see you get hurt, son." He says, "No, I don't think your heart's right for it," which I took as a little bit of a jab at 21. Like, "Oh, you don't feel I'm enough of a man to take care of myself." But I understood what he meant afterwards. He said, "I know you have a different kind of spirit, and it would wear on you." He said, "It wore on me. I could only do 5 years there." He said, "You've done 10. And we had a sort of a newfound respect because we saw each other. Obviously, he's my father, and he's the elder, but he saw me with a different set of eyes at that point, which was interesting.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Now, with the other books, the Hauntings, the St. Vincent Academy, and the Asylum one, how did you approach those? Because I'm guessing you didn't work in those and have any first-hand experience. What was the sort of background to them?
Well, see, when the penitentiary book came out, I was working there, obviously, and, I couldn't walk in with, temperature gauges or voice recorders or even a cell phone.
Yeah.
So most of what I'd had to do was, like, if I was on the outside perimeter, then I could maybe have a meter or a voice recorder. You can't have anything inside the penitentiary.
Yes.
But it was much more hands-on. Now, like Western State Hospital, which is what the later name for the Western Lunatic Asylum was, a lot of that came from staff, and there were so many staff. And, because, obviously you would have some people that were there for maybe drug classes, for, not everybody at, the hospital, because in the later stages of it, there's, narcotics programs. There's even a battered woman shelter on the property. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, people seeing things and having hallucinations. These are pretty solid people, other than that they have an addictive personality.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, anyone who had been in the facility on any level other than professionally and working, I didn't put their stories in. Yeah. But there was so many come up. There was situations with people almost being strangled in the cold immersion room. And understand, this is another facility roughly built around the same time as the penitentiary.
Yeah.
Probably 30, 40 miles separation of it. It's all Western Kentucky, which is where I'm from. And this had its own area that was a TB ward. This had, during like when cholera was coming through really bad and Spanish flu and all that, they had isolation wards. And you would have people who would just disappear. You would have people that ended up, with their heads twisted at the bottom of the stairs. How did they get to the bottom of the stairs? We don't know. Why were they in that section that maybe was locked and then they found somebody dead in it? I don't know. Again, back in the day, a lot of times you got hired in for a state job. It was a common denominator. Are you a big guy? Are you strong? Do you have a problem, jumping on somebody? Mm-hmm. It was not touchy-feely. It was very, very brutal and basic. But that particular facility has grown. It went from like a few male and female wards, and again, this is the South, so you had white sections, black sections. Mm-hmm. And it was again a lot of violence and a lot of mistreatment, because this is during the time where we didn't want to see our special needs. We didn't want to see people with those problems. They were considered blighted, and they pushed them off the edge of town. Yeah. Thank God things have changed, but especially at that time, these were seen more as liabilities that people were happy to pay the state to take.
Yes.
And that made for a lot of dismal lives. And on top of that, back in the old days, it also had the county poorhouse. This is more or less, if you couldn't make your taxes, you couldn't do this and that, you would end up going to work on a work farm. Mm-hmm. Way back then, almost like indentured servitude. And sometimes people would work there, would have children on the property. Maybe someone were taking care of their grandkids or whatever. They end up aging out and dying. No one wants to take the children. These children have been raised on a work farm. They have no social skills. So where do they end up going? To the asylum.
Right. Yes.
And they sat there and spend the rest of what time they got. Sometimes they would stay there 20 years, before they, it's because living conditions were horrible. So now you get stories of, orphans. There's a place called the Orphan Walk up there, which overlooks the main road. And there were reports of, seeing sallow, pallid faces, very deep sunken in eyes of these little waifish orphans.
Yeah.
That, would try to, get your attention and tug at your dress hem or whatever. And it just, and just horrible stuff like that. That book for me was harder to write than the penitentiary book, because those people really didn't do anything to be there. They just had the unfortunate luck of being, marginalized for their special needs in a time that was not very forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally understand. And I say you don't need to feel bad about your state, because that was the same situation in the UK right through till 1950s, early 1960s almost. An awful lot of people in the asylums were just normal people who were not quite able to cope. And of course, once you've been kept in an asylum for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, longer, you become even, you do become institutionalized, and you really can't fend for yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And, that's the thing of, that's very true too of inmates. If you take a guy who say did work 20 years in the penitentiary, set him next to a guy who served 20 years in the penitentiary, put him in street clothes, they're going to lean against the wall the same certain way. They're going to study a room a certain way. They'll even smoke a cigarette a certain way. It's by osmosis. Both groups feed off of each other. And before long, that kind of cross-cultural trade-off, everybody becomes the same. Mm-hmm. And it's really strange. And see, the thing is with the hauntings of the St. Vincent's Academy, this was more or less a Catholic compound. A group of nuns had came into this area. This is back when Kentucky was still, well, I don't know if you know this. We have an area called Transylvania University in Kentucky. Which I always thought was super, for me, being a horror fan, I'm like, this is great. But, I didn't realize, I think Transylvania means like the land beyond the deep woods. And, which I would have preferred this have been Transylvania, America, but I would have taken that. But for whatever reason, they set up compounds and did this and that. And some things went really well, and some things went really bad. The Civil War was a really dark time. And a lot of men were wounded, lost arms, lost legs. Some people were. It's a triage situation. Mm-hmm. If it looks like maybe we'll save that person, sit them down, try to make them comfortable, but fix the one guy you can. Mm-hmm. And there were situations where people would have reports of screams and like just blood-curdling howls, and then also the sounds of animals. And come to find out they were the sounds of pigs, because apparently during the Civil War in that certain area of Kentucky, there was a big battle going on between the North and the South, and all the people in the middle were hidden in their homes. Mm-hmm. Well, this battle would go on for a day or two. No one would come out. They couldn't tend their horses. They couldn't tend their pigs. They couldn't tend their cows or chickens or whatnot. Well, when it finally cleared off, people would go out and they were checking on their pigs and things. Well, all the pigs were gone. And so they thought, well, either the North or the Southern soldiers stole our pigs.
Yes.
Or they let them loose, because they started hearing grunts up in the hills. And they're like, they let them go. Okay, well, we got to go round them up. So here come all the men. The men are going up into the grass. They've got sticks and whatnot to try to, chase them back down. The women are down around the outside of the edge of the grasses with bags, large, like burlap bags. They used to call them pokes here in the day. A poke bag. You poke the pig in the back, and the pig in a poke.
Pig in a poke.
So anyway, they're up there, pig in a poke. So they're going up there, and before they get to the back end, they hear a woman screaming. They run down. A few of the guys are still trying to get the pigs. One of the guys runs back down with a shotgun or some weapon. And this woman's beside herself. She's cowered against a wall, shaking. And it's like, what's wrong with you? He's looking for soldiers. And she can't hardly get it out of her mouth. Her eyes are, big as dinner plates. And finally, he almost had to shake her, almost smack her to get her to talk. And she said, there. And so he looked, and he could see a pig. And he says, well, why didn't you get the pig? He walks over to it. The pig's acted really weird. It turns around. It's covered in blood from face halfway down its chest, and it's got a human foot in its mouth. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, all the pigs were in starvation mode. They went up there, not only ate the discarded arms, legs, other things, they attacked the men that were laying on the ground dying. Of course, they're screaming. They go into predator mode, and they basically are killing all these men. They were pigs that you could see where it looked like where something was kind of protruding through their stomach, almost like you would see an infant put their hand up to the belly inside of the mother. And of course, they had to kill all the animals, and they couldn't eat them. They couldn't sell them. And it's so interesting that this is where they had all this paranormal activity, and they didn't. A lot of people don't know this. I had to research it and go back in personal journals. Thank God for the internet, because before it was going to this library, go to that library. trying to find Old Man Smithers and see if he still, has any recollection of the war back in whenever. And I was lucky enough to find that. And there's so many different bizarre, dark stories like that. And it's what it does for me is that not only does it open up a lot of history and about the way people lived, because for me that's as much as fun as learning about the ghost, learning about the early days, learning about just things that we would have to learn how to completely relive and retool ourselves. The lives that we have, obviously, in this modern era is wonderful. You don't want to have to go 2 miles down a hill, and fighting natives and wild wolves and coyotes. Where you just turn on a tap for most people.
Yes.
So, but that coupled with all the superstitions and all the folklore, it made for a very dry.
Have you finished with your hauntings series, or have you still got more you want to write?
Oh boy, the best way to answer that is maybe. Maybe. I honestly, when I first started doing this, I did my first book, my first 2 books actually through Bermuda Press. And after dealing with those guys, I kind of discovered I couldn't eat. So I went and started doing self-publishing. And amazingly, I can eat a little bit now. So I put 2 books out through them. I put 2 books out on my own of the haunting series. And there's a few other places I wouldn't mind checking out. I wouldn't mind doing like hauntings of global, and touch on different spots around the world that's got a history of haunting and from the strange, just natural lines and whatnot. But as of now, that's on the burner. But I actually have, in probably about 2 months, I have a collection of short stories that ranges everything from, local paranormal activity to all kinds of different stuff, fairy folk to almost Lovecraft-in type stories that ties into that. But then I'm also putting together because again, I'm from the South and Kentucky is what I know mostly. There are 120 counties in the state of Kentucky. And so I've already got book 1 finished, which has got 60 chapters. The other one's going to have 60 chapters. It's going to cover strange, weird, and unusual events that happened in each of these counties. And there's a lot of really strange things that's happened here I wouldn't have realized. But I do very much want to do one, especially on ghost culture, that ties in with a lot of Asian cultures. I was lucky enough to be able to travel, to Thailand, Japan, places like that, and learn about like the hungry ghosts and things like that. They take it serious. They're not playing, and they will get on to you if you're eating, and let's just say you drop your fork and it has like a piece of rice, anything on it. They will scold you. You better not pick that up because they're going to be afraid that the hungry ghost will follow one of us home. I mean, it's a very, it's so amazing because, like I said, I'm from a small area that's maybe got 9,000 people or so. So you go to a large metropolitan area, so like Tokyo or Bangkok, and to hear people speak like that, it's strange. It's just, for me, it's such a dichotomy of belief and physical wealth. It's bizarre to me, but I'm very lucky that people have opened, their homes and their hearts and stuff to let me do that. So it's definitely been an education. That's, for me, the biggest thing is learning all this stuff and being able to share these experiences with other people, because in the end, all we have is each other. I hope I don't sound too, hippy-dippy, but it's a thing. Shared experiences is what it's about. For me, the older that I get, I'm learning it's those personal connections that matter. It's not how good an EVP you got or how great a ghost photo you got, or did you get to go investigate that place no one ever got to go to, a flower in your head. It's about, really honestly, for me, it's humbling yourself and coming away from experiences from people and their cultures a better person, hopefully. And that's the thing. As much as I love ghosts and as much as I love that, if you open yourself up to things and you try to learn and you try to read about things and you immerse yourself in other cultures, the biggest way to fight racism and fear and misgivings and jealousy is by going to other cultures. Yes. And for me, that's been worth, the journey.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Your short stories book, is this going to be called Short Stories for Darker Nights?
Yes. Short Stories for Darker Nights. I'd kicked around a few different titles, but it kind of, I don't know, for some reason I was actually listening to some Beatles songs, or I think maybe it was a John Lennon song, and he always would have a play on words.
Yes.
And for some reason that stuck in my head, and I thought, well, that's rather smart. Let's try that. I don't know where I come up with it. Maybe it come through the ether or something, but I just liked it, So I thought it had a good little hook to it.
Yeah.
I was thinking if I picked it up, that would be an interesting, that's an interesting title. Maybe I'll check this out.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been really fun. And that's the thing. Again, I did not plan to be a writer at all any more than I necessarily plan to do, a podcast or some of the other stuff I do.
Yeah.
It's just, again, I'm 51 and I'm like, I'm going to have a limited shelf life of being able to get out and do things. So now's the time to do them.
One of the things, certainly over in the UK, everybody's talking about is wildlife seems to be more prevalent because obviously there's less cars around, less people around to disturb them, no planes flying over and everything. Have you had picked up any reports on, I suppose, what you'd call paranormal activity? Are more ghosts coming out to play because we're on lockdown?
In the things that I'm dealing with, because a friend of mine had just moved into a location. No one had been there for quite a while. And had some sort of situation with, I thought they were talking about seeing a small girl, kind of thin, dressed pretty poorly. And she said the child's jaw appeared kind of messed up. And so I'm thinking of like the little matchstick girl or something like that. Do you remember the story of do you remember what falsy jaw is? You may not.
What was it again? Sorry, it didn't come over too clearly.
Falsy jaw. Back in the days when they used to have
yes,
working in the match.
Yeah.
And they get that phosphorus or something. They would have to lick the sticks to dip it in the thing.
That was
and they got phosphorus in their mouth and it rotted their jaws off.
Yes.
And I thought she was talking about that. And so I'm not sure if it's connected to some person or child that ended up in this area or if the child was damaged some other way. But that has definitely picked up. Definitely have seen activity more with animals. I deal with quite a bit, especially I've probably seen 30 owls. And I know that this is kind of maybe not sound very paranormal, but 30 owls or so in probably the last 2 months. And it seems like a lot of the animals that were on the outskirts are now coming in. It's just like, man moves out of the way, nature takes over. So the area I'm in is actually just outside of Princeton called Farmersville. And then we have gobs of coyotes, and we have, all kinds of different, deer and different creatures. The natural order is taking over again. We like to think we are the natural order, but, we're kind of new to the game. These creatures have been here for eons.
Just as a sort of final point, you've talked about books that you are looking to write and planning to write, but quite early on you were saying how you stay clear of the demonology side of things. Are there any particular places or locations or topics local to you that you would never want to write a book about, or a place you'd never want to go on a bit of paranormal investigation?
Well, when I say I kind of bristle with the demonology thing, honestly, it's more of a thing, obviously, that, if these things are real, they're powerful. But also, I don't have the ego to go, I'm pious enough to go toe-to-toe with something like that. I know my shortcomings. I mean, I try to be a good man, but, that's relative. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to go somewhere where there's been like a lot of, say, demonic activity or, dark magic. I've been in a few places like that. I get physically nauseous with it. I don't know if I'm slightly empathic, but it makes me physically sick. There is one place that I would like to check out, the Highgate area. This is back when I'm blanking on his last name, David.
Is this Highgate, UK?
Yes.
Oh, that was David Farrant and.
That's it. Yeah, it was had the F. And I was actually going to interview him before he passed. I grew up again loving Hammer films and everything connected with that, and loved all the old investigative shows from over there. Yes. Like the Enfield Poltergeist and all that. I just ate that up. I loved it. I thought it was such an interesting thing. I would love to check it out, and hopefully maybe in time I will make my way across the water and check it out. They'd probably look at me like I'm some caveman that crawled out of a cave coming from Western Kentucky. But
I say, sadly, they have tidied up Highgate Cemetery a lot now. It used to be quite overrun and derelict. And when I was a student living in London, we'd go up there and, there were tombs that were open and you could see coffins that had been pulled open and the contents were all over the floor. But I say it has been gentrified and tidied up, but it's still a very evocative place, and the whole layout of it, of the sort of mausoleums and the things, it's definitely a place, yes.
Well, let me ask, do you believe that, there is some form of vampire, or do you feel that, there are, we people, or things like that? What sort of, and I don't mean to kind of take over your questioning, but is there something that you would go, oh, well, yeah, I kind of do feel that maybe this is something that's actually legitimate because of legend or fan tradition? Is there something out there that maybe you would go, oh, well, yeah, maybe I do believe in Loch Ness Monster, or I believe in this and that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical in the sense of I can often see that there's an obvious physical, normal, if you like, explanation for some things. You get a lot of people getting very excited about orbs and things like that. And you can say, well, no, it's quite clearly moisture on the camera lens, or it's, dust motes floating around. But I would say there is just so many reports for so many hundreds of years of ghosts, the Fae, the little people, cryptid type creatures from, the Sasquatch through to Loch Ness Monster and the like. There is just so much of it that you can't just say, oh, well, it's just people, being deluded or mass hysteria or something of that nature. I haven't had any experiences myself, but I'm that doesn't mean I don't think it doesn't exist. I think it was somebody, France in the 18th century or something, who was once asked, do you believe in ghosts? And they sort of said no, but I wouldn't like to meet one. And I think that's probably what it is. I haven't met any myself, and I'm probably quite grateful I haven't met one.
Well, and I think that's a healthy attitude. I never fully trust somebody who believes something 100%, especially if they have something to sell. Yes. And that's kind of glass houses. Obviously, I sell my books, but I'm not here to convert a soul. And luckily, due to the fact that, as I mentioned, there are a lot of people who are very religious. I never challenge their beliefs. I just go, I had physically seen a thing, or I had experienced a thing, or I've had reports of this and that. If you want to call it a demon, that's your belief system. It's a demon. You feel it's an elemental, or some sort of force of magic, that's fine too. It's just, to me, it's just as believable as some pointy winged gargoyle demon, bouncing along the walls. Spring Hill Jack. It could be whoever. So, like you said, I'm still kind of open for it because I can't definitively say one thing one way or another. But there are like you said, there are so many things that ties in past, obviously, popular culture, through Tolkien and early writers and things that branch off so much superstition. But every culture has some sort of we people, and a lot of these cultures had apparently no contact with each other. And like beyond there being an archetype and different type of experiences.
Yes, I mean, the Bigfoot, abominable snowman, the Yeti, they are at opposite ends of the planet. How likely is it that such different cultures in different places would come up just purely out of their own imagination with the same type of creature?
It's sure hard to explain away.
Anyway, Steve, thank you ever so much for your time, and we'll no doubt speak again at some point. And obviously, let me know if you ever do come over to the UK, if we ever have transatlantic flights again.
Fingers crossed. And thank you so much for having me on. And guys, appreciate it, and for tuning in. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Take care now. Cheers. And that's it. We're almost out of time. Once again, many thanks to Steve Asher for the interview. You can find his books on Amazon, and you should also check out his website at www.steveasher.com. And don't forget that extra E between Steve and Asher. Now it just remains for me, Charles Christian, to say thank you very much for listening in, and I'll hope you'll join me again, same time next week. Till then, stay well, stay weird, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @ChristianUncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.